Yeah. So there's never been in U.S. foreign policy, never been at any point a respect for Cuba's sovereignty or right to self-determination. It's just the tactics have changed at different points in time.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting that when Obama gave his speech, I don't mean to go on a length, but when Obama gave his speech, and like he talked about letting bygones be bygones, right? Forgetting, it's the same speech he gave in Accra, Ghana, right? Forgetting about the way the United States has actively, through its economic policies, but through its covert destabilizing policies, has destabilized the entire global South, and particularly in the case of Cuba, destabilizing Cuba, right? And so he gives that speech, right? Okay. And everybody was happy because I remember that date, December 17th, 2014. The rest of the final members of the Cuban Five, the 5 heroes who were defending Cuba from terrorism, were released from prison. There was those speeches almost simultaneous by Obama and Raul Castro. And then there was and eventually there was a visit of Obama and all that. And there was this excitement, right? And then, of course, you began to have increasing trade and interaction economically between Cuba and the United States. And people were extremely happy about that, because they said and the Cubans' position was that we'd rather deal with the United States, who try to overwhelm us with their so-called superior ideas and their capital and their economic influence, than to deal with this hyper-aggressive blockade, right? Because the revolutionary state still remained intact. But I always like to remember that there was this very prescient and powerful essay that was written by Fidel Castro. It says, "Don't trust the United States," right? Okay. And of course, it wasn't that people change opinions. He knew that when conditions did not suit the United States, when they would realize that their plan had failed, they would turn to another method to undermine the Cuban Revolution and so on. And to bring it back to Canada, I want to make this very interesting. At one point, Canada used to finance all sorts of training of Cuban managers, right? Of people who were part of the Cuban state sector and so forth. There was a lot of stuff going on. And the whole idea was we train these people in capitalist methods, right? We train them in our ways of thinking. And then they would go back and be like, weevils, right? Undermine the system from within. And that failed, okay? And when that policy clearly failed, Canada stepped back from actually supporting, fostering, and financing these kinds of activities, right? So even if Obama, his policy had continued under, like say Clinton had carried on with those policies, Obama was able to win a 3rd term, I think once that policy had seemed to have been a failure, they would have returned to the hyper-aggression. The goal is always to destroy the Cuban Revolution, to destroy its example, right? It's the unforgivable revolution, just as the Haitian Revolution was the unforgivable revolution in 1791, leading to the Declaration of Haitian Independence in 1804, the independent Black Republic. There's this kind of historical sort of parallel experience between the Haitian Revolution and Cuba. Their very existence is unpalatable.
Right.
Yeah, Isaac, I totally agree with you. There's one aspect I'd like to emphasize, essentially, and that is that there was also internal contradiction inside of the United States. There's a section of the American capitalist class who felt that the inroads that China was making in the Caribbean and Latin America and Africa as well, that they need to counter that. And for that, from that perspective, Obama supposedly think he could use this charm, but nobody was fooled that Obama was not anti-imperialist. Obama was just more or less using a friendly face to think that he could make some inroads and carry on the American policy in the same sense. But fundamentally, nothing has changed. What is important, though, is that we need to understand, and just recently I was discussing this with a friend, is the relationship between Obama and Biden. And it's not well spoken of that, in fact, Obama selected Biden as vice president because of Joe Biden's right-wing policy. Because Obama didn't think that he will get the vote of the right. So he chose Biden from that perspective. So nothing has changed about Biden. And if we reflect, Biden have had a very disastrous record in the Caribbean as well. Don't forget that Joe Biden was one of the people who tried to undermine the Michael Mann government in the 1970s, and a whole host of other foreign policy. So he's carrying on as he is. And the people are rechristening him and giving him a name, but they call him Genocide Joe. I think it's quite an appropriate name for him.